tested by hunger or fear, but by the deep loneliness of being different, of believing something the world around them refused to understand. The journey of Isra and Miraj remained at the center of their strength, a tale so majestic that it had etched itself into their souls. Among the followers was a young man named Amr, who had grown up hearing only stories of battles and trade. But when the Prophet shared the story of his night journey, Amr felt something awaken in him he had never seen. The heavens never heard the voice of angels, but when the Prophet described the Lot tree and the light of Sidrat al-Muntaha, Amr wept. He said, "Even if the whole world turns against me, I will walk this path alone because I know it leads to the one above." It was this kind of faith that frightened the Quraysh. The more they mocked the Prophet, the stronger the believers became, and the more they punished the weak, the more the Ummah stood together, bound not by blood, but by truth. Prophet would often gather them in secret and remind them that this life was only a blink, that the real life was what lay beyond the sky. He would tell them about the moment when he stood in front of Allah and felt a peace that wrapped his heart in a way no words could ever capture. One night, he said, "I was shown the future of my Ummah. I saw faces glowing with light coming to me at the fountain of Kauthar. I saw nations rise and fall, and I saw the day of judgment with its horror and its hope. I saw a bridge thinner than a hair, sharper than a sword, and below it the fire of hell. But those who prayed and believed crossed it like lightning, while others stumbled." The companions sat silent around him, their eyes wide, their breaths held. Every word he spoke was not just a memory, it was a key to the future, a way to prepare for the unseen trials. He also said, "I was shown the book where every deed is written, every action, even the movement of a leaf by a believer, is known to Allah. And I saw that nothing escapes his mercy, nothing escapes his knowledge." As the persecution increased, and the Prophet lost his beloved wife, Khadijah, and his uncle Abu Talib, the pain of this world grew heavier. But in those nights when he remembered the light he had seen above the seventh heaven, his sorrow melted into patience, and he reminded his followers, "Do not lose heart, for with hardship comes ease, and with patience comes reward." The children of the believers would sometimes ask, "Ya Rasulallah, will we see the places you saw?" And he would kneel and say, "If you hold firm, if you speak truth and love justice, then one day you will see not only what I saw, but even greater, for paradise has what no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, and what no heart has imagined." These words were more powerful than gold, more lasting than any sword, because they planted hope in hearts that were surrounded by fear. Even the night sky seemed to listen each time the Prophet recited verses revealed about the journey. "Glory be to the one who took his servant by night from Masjid al-Haram to Masjid al-Aqsa." The heavens would seem to lean closer, and the stars would flicker, as if bearing witness again. Then came a night when the Prophet was approached by Jibril once more, but not for a journey, this time for a warning. He said, "Your time in Mecca is nearing its end, for they plan something darker than words or chains. They plan to take your life." The Prophet did not panic. He looked toward the Kaaba, and with tears in his eyes he whispered, "Ya Allah, I have done what you asked. I have said what you revealed. Now guide me where you want me to go." Soon after the command to migrate to Madinah arrived, the journey of Hijrah began, but in his heart, the memory of the other journey, the Miraj, remained stronger than ever, the journey that showed him the unseen and taught him that no matter how far one runs, the truth remains above. Watching, guiding, waiting, as he left Mecca behind, he turned to face the city and said, "By Allah, you are the most beloved land to me. If I were not forced out, I would never leave you." And with that he walked away, carrying in his heart not just grief, but the knowledge of what lies beyond. Years later, when the Muslims grew stronger, when Medina became a home for faith, and the Quraysh were humbled by defeat, the story of Miraj was told not in secret, but openly from every corner of the Masjid. The Prophet would remind them of the night that changed everything, would say that the journey was not just mine, it was a lesson for you all, to never limit Allah by your fears, to never doubt what is unseen, and to never forget that each of you has the ability to rise just as I rose, not through wings or speed, but through sincerity, patience, and prayer. He explained that every sujud takes you closer to the heavens, every good deed brings you nearer to the fountain of Kauthar, and every tear you shed in the fear of Allah is caught before it touches the ground by angels who record its worth. Then came the final days of his life when the Prophet grew weak. But even then when he prayed, he stood firm. When he smiled, he carried light. And when he spoke, his voice still held the echo of that sacred night. On his final Friday, he said to the people, I leave you with two things. If you hold them, you will never be lost, the Book of Allah and my Sunnah. And when the time came and he returned to his Lord, it was with a heart that had crossed time-space in sorrow and returned with truth for every soul. The story of Isra and Miraj did not end that night. It began that night. It began as a miracle, but grew into a movement of hearts across generations. It became a reminder that no matter how deep the darkness, how heavy the trial, or how far the journey, the path to Allah is always open. It taught that time and space bend when faith stands tall, that the world may laugh, but the heavens listen, and that the one who walks with truth even alone is never truly alone. For on that night one man rode through the stars and returned with a prayer that touches your heart even today. And that is not just history, that is hope. End. Every lesson the Prophet spoke of the heavens, the different prophets he met, and the messages each one gave. He told them about Sidrat al-Muntaha, a tree beyond which nothing goes. He told them about the angels, the rivers of paradise, the punishments of hell, and the nearness of Allah. He spoke of a people who had nails of copper and scratched their own faces and chests, and he said these were the ones who spoke ill of others and spread lies. He spoke of people who had stones placed in their mouths until their jaws broke. These were the ones who lied and deceived. He told them about a bull that left a small hole and then tried to return but could not. And Jibril said, this is like the word that escapes the tongue once it is said, it cannot be taken back. These were not just stories. These were mirrors for the soul. Each vision was a lesson, a warning, and a reminder that actions have consequences, that speech carries weight, and that this life is only a shadow compared to the next. One night, as the Prophet was walking alone in the hills of Mecca, reflecting on the burden of what he had seen, he paused and looked up at the stars. He thought of the people still in darkness, still rejecting the light, and his heart felt heavy. He whispered, "O Allah, guide my people. They do not know, they are lost and blind, but they are still yours." And in that moment, the stars above seemed to shine brighter, as if they heard his prayer, as if the heavens themselves remembered his journey and smiled at the one who had crossed their gates. Meanwhile, the Quraysh leaders grew more angry, not just at the story, but at the strength of his followers. Instead of weakening them, the journey had made their faith stronger. It had made them more united and more focused. They began to increase the torture of the believers. They placed heavy stones on the backs of the weak, burned the skin of the innocent, and tried to silence the call to prayer. But no matter how hard they pushed, the believers held on to what they had heard from the Prophet. They knew he had seen the truth, and if he could survive such a journey and return with peace in his heart, then they too could survive anything in this world. A young man once asked the Prophet, "O Messenger of Allah, how did you feel when you reached the presence of Allah?" And the Prophet placed his hand over his chest and said, "I felt peace beyond words and light that filled my being. It was not fear, it was closeness." Another man asked, "How could you travel through such distances in one night?" And he smiled and said, "When Allah commands time and space, obey from." That day, the event of Isra and Miraj was not just remembered as a miracle, but as a turning point. It became a night of proof, a night of revelation, and a night when the Prophet became more than just a teacher. He became the one who returned from the unseen to guide the seen. Though the Quraysh continued to reject him, the people who believed in his journey felt a deep connection with the divine. They prayed with more focus, they gave with more heart, and they forgave with more strength, because they knew their Prophet had seen the reality behind the veil and had come back to lead them there. As night fell again over Mecca, and the Prophet sat beneath the same stars, he closed his eyes and remembered the voice of his Lord and the beauty of the heavens, and in his heart was a peace that no mockery could break, no insult could touch. No darkness could erase time travel of Prophet Muhammad. Hidden truths of Iraj night. As time passed, the journey of Isra and Miraj became more than just a memory for the believers. It became a source of strength during days of deep struggle. Every word spoken by the Prophet about that sacred night echoed like a light through the darkness of Mecca, where the oppression against the Muslims had grown heavier and more cruel than ever before. The Quraysh leaders began using every tool to crush the message. They banned trade with the Prophet and his followers. They broke family ties and placed them in a valley outside Mecca known as Shab Abi Talib, where food and water became rare and hope was tested daily. The Prophet endured all this not with anger, but with patience. His face carried peace, even when his stomach carried hunger, because he had seen something they had not. He had touched the truth of the unseen. Every time a believer felt weak, they remembered that their Prophet had traveled through the skies, had spoken to his Lord, had been to a place where even angels could not go, and had returned with a message, not just of worship but of mercy and forgiveness. It was no longer just a story, it was a living guide through pain and fear. One night during these hard days, a young boy named Zayd asked the Prophet, "Ya Rasulallah, is it true you saw paradise with your own eyes?" And the Prophet placed his hand on Zayd's head and said, "Yes, I saw the rivers flowing beneath trees whose leaves never die. I saw homes of light and palaces made of pearls and gold. I saw your name written among the people of Jannah if you remain patient and truthful." Zayd held those words like treasure in his heart, and from that night onward, he smiled even through the hunger, because he knew the reward was real and near. The Prophet also told the companions about the angels. He spoke of rows upon rows of angels standing in worship, some in bowing, some in prostration, some praising Allah without end, and each one shining with light brighter than the sun. He told them about the angel Malik, the keeper of hell, whose face was stern and who did not smile even at the arrival of the Prophet, because his role was to guard the fire and never show softness. He described hell itself, the sounds, the darkness, the punishments prepared for those who denied truth and hurt others, not as a tale of fear, but as a warning born of mercy. He wanted people to save themselves before it was too late. The Prophet also told of people he saw during his journey who suffered because of their sins. He saw men who had their lips cut by iron scissors, and he said these were those who preached goodness, but did not follow it themselves. He saw women hanging by their hair, because they had exposed themselves to tempt others and ignored the commands of modesty and faith. Each vision was not just a scene, it was a mirror showing what the human soul could become if left without guidance, without repentance, without mercy. But the Prophet also saw joy. He spoke of people whose faces shined with light, whose garments were bright, and who stood beside fountains that never ran dry. These were the ones who lived with honesty, who fed the poor, who spoke truth, even when it was hard, and who never gave up on their prayers. One night as he sat with his closest companions, he said, "Allah showed me the highest level of paradise where the rivers are. Not water but honey, milk, and wine that brings no sin, where trees carry fruits. Lower than your hand, where the houses are built not with bricks, but with words of dhikr and remembrance, and each time a believer says Subhanallah or Alhamdulillah, a gem is placed for him in the land of paradise." The companions listened with hearts open wide, each word planting a seed of faith, stronger than the chains placed on them by the corridor. Quraysh among the believers was a woman named Sumaya who held on to these words like a sword. She had once heard the Prophet describe the fragrance of paradise and the sound of its winds, and though she was weak in body, she became a mountain in spirit. Even when the Quraysh tortured her, she whispered the name of Allah and smiled through the pain, because she had seen through the Prophet what awaited the patient and the faithful. And then there was Umar, who had once been an enemy of Islam, now transformed by the words of the Prophet and the truth of the journey. He began defending the believers with courage, because he too believed that the Prophet had returned with more than just words. He had returned with evidence from the heavens. Journey of Miraj had not just opened the sky, it had opened hearts and transformed souls. The 5 daily prayers became more than just an act. They became a ladder to the heavens, a reminder of the night when the prophet stood before his Lord and returned with a gift for all of mankind. He told them that each prayer was like stepping closer to paradise. Each sujud was like touching the earth, while the soul touched the stars, and that in every Fajr and every Isha, there was a secret door to peace if one opened it with sincerity and love. Even the children began praying with joy, the elders with tears, and the youth with strength, because they now knew that the earth was not the end, that above the sky was a place that welcomed those who believed and fought their desires and trusted there. Lord, as the prophet walked through Mecca, every stone seemed to know who he was. Every tree leaned slightly, every wind carried his name, not just as a man, but as a messenger who had walked through the universe and returned with a heart full of light. The Quraysh still refused to accept it. They said, how can a man fly? How can he see what no one sees? How can he speak with his Lord in return? But deep down their hearts trembled, because they could see in the eyes of the believers something they could not break. They saw certainty, and they saw a love that no sword could silence. And in the stillness of another night, the prophet rose again to pray, this time not to travel through the skies, but to guide the souls of his people. He faced the Kaaba, he raised his hands, and he whispered, Ya Allah, make them understand. Ya Allah, soften their hearts. Ya Allah, let the light of Miraj enter every home. And above him in the heavens, the angels who had once welcomed him now prayed for his Ummah, for the men and women who followed him without seeing what he saw, but believed with hearts purer than gold. Time travel of Prophet Muhammad. Hidden truths of Miraj night. As the days passed in the heat of Mecca grew stronger, the believers found themselves not just time travel of Prophet Muhammad. Hidden truths of Miraj night. The night sky over Mecca was still and silent, as if the world itself had paused for something beyond imagination. The streets were quiet, the homes asleep, and the stars above shimmered with a strange glow, as if they were witnesses to a secret the world was not ready to understand. Inside his humble home, the Prophet Muhammad was resting near the Kaaba when something beyond time and space was about to begin, something that no human had ever experienced before. Suddenly, a light filled the room, but it was not from a lamp. It was a light that had no flame, no shadow. It simply existed, glowing like a sign from the heavens. Before he could rise or speak, the angel Jibril appeared, and beside him was a strange and beautiful creature, unlike any seen before. It was the Burak, an animal pure white with wings and the speed of light. It stood calm but ready, as if it too knew the importance of this moment. Jibril gently said, O Muhammad, tonight you are invited by Allah himself to witness what no man has seen. You are to travel not just through space, but beyond it. You are to rise through the skies above the heavens and meet your Lord. But first we journey to al-Aqsa in Jerusalem, and from there the real ascension begins. Without hesitation, without fear, the Prophet mounted the Burak, and in the blink of an eye they soared over mountains, rivers, and deserts, crossing vast lands as if the earth folded beneath them. As they reached Masjid al-Aqsa, all the past prophets stood there waiting to greet him. They were not surprised, they were expecting him. They knew who he was. He was the seal of the prophets, the one whose arrival was foretold. He led them in prayer, a moment that united the past and present. All of the messengers of Allah stood behind him as he led the Salah. It was a powerful sign that he was chosen for something beyond comprehension. The earthly part of the journey had ended, and now what lay ahead was something even angels found hard to grasp. Jibril looked at the Prophet with great care, and together they rose through the heavens. The sky cracked open like a veil being lifted, and they entered the first heaven. There they met Prophet Adam, the father of mankind. He welcomed the Prophet with joy and prayed for his success. It was a greeting not just of love, but of responsibility. As if passing a torch through generations, in the second heaven, they met Prophet Isa and Prophet Yahya, who embraced the Prophet with light in their eyes, speaking not with words, but with hearts that understood the burden he carried in the third heaven was Prophet Yusuf, whose beauty was unmatched, but his smile that night was filled with deep recognition and honor. Each level of heaven opened like a secret gate with a guardian angel asking, "Who's with you?" And Jibril would answer, "This is Muhammad." And every gate would open with reverence, as if even the barriers of the cosmos bowed to his arrival. In the fourth heaven was Prophet Idris, who had been raised high in rank, and in the fifth, Prophet Harun stood with a calmness that gave peace to the soul. In Coda, the sixth heaven, Prophet Musa awaited him, and though he welcomed the Prophet, he wept when he saw him. It was not jealousy but sorrow, for he knew what challenges awaited the Ummah of the Prophet. He knew the struggle and the pain, but also the glory. Finally they reached the seventh heaven, and there was the friend of Allah, Prophet Ibrahim, reclining against al-Bayt al-Mor, the heavenly Kaaba, directly above the one in Mecca. He looked at the Prophet with eyes full of warmth and love, and told him, "Give your Ummah my greetings, and tell them paradise is pure and its soil is sweet. But the journey to reach it is not easy." But the journey did not end there. Jibril stopped as they reached the place called Sidrat al-Muntaha, the lote tree of the utmost boundary, beyond which not even the angel could pass. The Prophet was invited to continue alone. He moved forward into a realm beyond creation, a place where no angel, no prophet, no being had ever stood. He was shown the ultimate realities, the secrets of the universe, the balance between life and death, reward and punishment. There, in a moment that defied time, space, and human understanding, the Prophet was in direct communion with Allah, without any barrier, without any angel between them. What passed between them cannot be fully grasped, but from that sacred meeting, the gift of 5 daily prayers was given to the believers, something that began as 50, but was gently reduced upon request by the Prophet after his conversations with Prophet Musa, who advised him that the Ummah might not bear such weight, and so it became 5 prayers, but with the reward of 50, a mercy upon mercy wrapped in light. As he descended back through the heavens, each prophet bid him farewell with honor and respect. Jibril remained by his side, silent but watchful, as they returned to Masjid al-Aqsa, and then again mounted the Burak and returned to Mecca. But here is where the mystery deepens. The entire journey from Mecca to Jerusalem, through 7 heavens, into the presence of Allah, and back, all took place within the span of a single night. Some say it was less than a blink. Some say the bed he rested on was still warm when he returned. How is such a thing possible? How can a man travel through galaxies, through time and divine realms, in moments? Some called it a dream, some called it madness, but those who believe knew that time itself bends by the will of Allah, and that the laws of nature are merely shadows before divine command. The Prophet knew the next day would be difficult. People would mock him, question him, challenge his truth, but he was not afraid. He had seen what no one else had, and he carried in his heart not just memories, but a divine mission to lead his people with faith, with patience, and with hope. And as the sun rose over Mecca and the Prophet told the people what had happened that night, all of creation waited to see who would believe and who would deny. Among the first to believe without hesitation was Abu Bakr, who simply said if he said it, then it is true. His faith did not need science, did not need logic, it needed only love and certainty. And so the journey of Isra and Miraj was not just a miracle, it was a test, a lesson, and a mercy. It was a journey through time, but also through the soul, a reminder that the Prophet was not just a messenger, he was a traveler between worlds, a guide across unseen paths, and a light through the deepest darkness. The time travel of Prophet Muhammad was not fiction, it was faith. It was not imagination, it was revelation, and it marked the night when the earth touched the heavens and a man walked where no one else ever had. Time travel of Prophet Muhammad. Hidden truths of Miraj night, when the Prophet returned to Mecca. After the miraculous journey of Isra and Miraj, the sky was still dark. The streets were still silent, but something within him had changed forever. He had seen the unseen, spoken to his Lord, and witnessed the truth that no man had ever known, yet the world around him remained The same, the doubts, the mocking, the disbelief, all waited for the break of dawn as the sun slowly lit. The rooftops of Mecca, the prophet sat in reflection. The journey had not just tested the limits of creation, it had tested his heart, and now the real test was to come. How would the people respond? How would they treat the truth he had brought? Would they believe him or would they call him mad? He went out to share what had happened, and the first ones who heard him paused in shock. The prophet said, "Last night I was taken from the Kaaba to Masjid al-Aqsa, then raised through the heavens, and spoke directly with my Lord, and I returned by morning." The words traveled quickly through the city, reaching the ears of the Quraysh, who burst into laughter. Some clapped their hands in mockery, some held their stomachs as they laughed, others shouted, "This is impossible. This is madness. Do you think we are fools?" They gathered around him, pressing him for details, asking questions meant to trap him. "How many doors does Masjid al-Aqsa have? Describe it to us if you truly went there." The prophet paused for a moment. He had never seen the masjid clearly enough to count its doors, but then Allah placed the image of Masjid al-Aqsa in front of his eyes, and he began to describe everything from the color of the walls to the layout of the gates, and the people listened, stunned by the accuracy, yet still their hearts refused to accept. But when Abu Bakr heard the story, he did not blink. He did not ask for proof. He simply said, "I believe him in everything he says. If he said this, then it is true." This moment earned him the name as Siddiq, the truthful, the loyal, the one who stood firm when others doubted. Prophet then told them about the caravan he had passed on the way back from Jerusalem. He described the number of camels, the time of arrival, and even that one of the camels was lost, and the group had searched for it. The Quraysh waited at the city gate to verify it, and when the caravan arrived with every detail, just as described, they had no words left. Still, they chose denial over truth. For some people the heart is more blind than the eyes, and for them, no miracle is enough. But among those who believed, something deeper began to grow. They understood that this journey was not just about miracles. It was about guidance, about preparing the soul for the trials to come. It showed that Allah had chosen the prophet, not just as a leader, but as a traveler between worlds, someone who had seen the vastness of creation and returned to teach mankind how to walk the straight path. In secret meetings, the believers gathered to hear the full story, not out of doubt, but out of love. They wanted to know every moment, every sight,